Hi, my name's Julian. I didn't think much of it when Dad left his phone at my place, but when it rang, her face lit up the screen. My mother. The same woman we buried 6 years ago. I picked it up, and that voice. It wasn't just a recording. It knew me. It blamed me. And then came the message, the will isn't finalized. That was the first crack. What came next? Lies so carefully stitched together, even grief couldn't see the thread. Turns out, my brother never let her go. He just turned her into a weapon. But the worst part? I almost believed it was really her. It was a little past 8 p.m. when I walked through the door, the cool autumn air still clinging to my jacket. The house was silent, just the way I liked it after a long day staring at screens and solving bugs that shouldn't exist in the first place. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and headed straight for the kitchen. That's when I saw it. Dad's phone. It was sitting alone on the counter, slightly scratched, screen facing up. I almost didn't notice it at first. We'd had a family dinner just hours ago. Dad must have left it behind in the shuffle. Typical. The man barely remembered his reading glasses. I reached for a bottle of water when the screen lit up. My hand froze. Martha Holt. I blinked. There she was. A photo of Mom, smiling in that sunflower dress, the one she wore every July. The picture had to be at least a decade old. Her name was glowing on the screen like it belonged there, like she hadn't died 6 years ago. The phone vibrated gently. My stomach twisted. No one else was in the house, no TV on, no music playing. Just that name. I stared at the call. I didn't pick it up. I didn't even breathe. It rang for another few seconds before going to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a text. The will isn't finalized. I stood there, water bottle in hand, unmoving. I wasn't sure if it was the word will or the name Martha or just the way everything felt off. But something inside me shifted. Rationally, I told myself it had to be a mistake, some synced contact glitch, an old group text. Hell, maybe Adrian was playing one of his games. But emotionally, I couldn't ignore the chill crawling up my spine. I sat down at the kitchen table and unlocked the phone. No password. Dad still trusted everyone, too much. There was only one message in the thread. Just one. Arthur doesn't know what Adrian did. My chest tightened. I scrolled up. Nothing else. No previous messages. No number. Just the name. Martha Holt. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the buttons, unsure what to do. The rational part of me screamed, "It's a prank. It has to be." But the rest of me, the part that still missed her voice, that still thought of her when I smelled cinnamon or jasmine tea, wanted to believe something more. Adrian. The name echoed in my mind like a warning bell. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. 6 years ago. Mom's funeral was tasteful, polished, exactly what Adrian wanted. I barely spoke that day. I had a eulogy prepared, folded in my jacket pocket, but Adrian had waved me off. Not now, Julian. It's better to keep things composed. I remember nodding. I remember swallowing every word I'd written. That was the moment I knew my brother didn't see me as his equal. And I let him. Mom's voice came back to me in memory. You were always the quiet one. That's your strength. But tonight, it felt like a curse. I snapped out of it and called Dad. Straight to voicemail. I called Adrian. Same thing. The silence of the house started to feel heavy. I went back to the message. No number. No contact under Martha Holt in the phone. I checked the recent calls. There it was. Outgoing call. To Martha Holt. Time, 6:14 p.m. Are you kidding me? I whispered. Was Dad calling Mom, or was someone calling through her name? How the hell was that even possible? I opened the voicemail inbox. There was a new message. I tapped it. A soft voice played. Arthur, we need to talk about the will. I dropped the phone. The voice was hers. Not kind of like hers. Not sort of familiar. It was exactly her. The tone, the softness, the way she said Arthur like it still held warmth. I stood up too fast, knocking my chair slightly. My palms were damp. My heartbeat kicked up in my ears. This wasn't just some glitch. This was planned, precise. And someone in my family wanted me to hear it. I picked up the phone again and checked the voicemail details. The number was masked, but the data metadata listed a server, my brother's company. I didn't sleep. By the time the sky turned from black to bruised gray, I was already in the car, heading downtown. The city hadn't fully woken up yet. Just joggers, dog walkers, and a few early commuters. But my mind was miles ahead, tangled in a web that smelled like Adrian's brand of manipulation. Holt & Sons Investment sat in the middle of Austin's polished business district, all glass and steel, sterile as a surgical room. Adrian's name was etched into the main entrance, bold, sharp, impossible to miss. I stepped inside. The air was cold, the kind that made you feel unwelcome. The receptionist gave me a tight-lipped smile when I asked to see him. She glanced at her screen like she was weighing whether I was important enough to buzz up. Eventually, she picked up the phone, spoke in a hushed tone, then nodded toward the elevator. His office was on the 18th floor. Corner suite, of course. Everything was modern, curated, expensive in a way that whispered power without needing to say it aloud. He stood near the window, back to me, arms crossed like a politician waiting for a headline. "Morning," he said without turning around. "You could have called." I didn't sit. "I needed to see your face when I asked this." He finally turned. His smile was too easy. "Julian, you're acting like this is an episode of Dateline. What's going on?" I pulled out Dad's phone, held it up like a badge. "Did you or Dad add Mom's name back in here?" For a second, he didn't say anything. Then came the smirk. "You're still chasing ghosts, huh?" "I'm serious, Adrian. So am I." He walked past me, poured himself coffee like we were just catching up. "Look, if this is about the tech glitches again, maybe lay off Reddit before bed." There was a message from Mom on Dad's phone. He set the cup down with just a little more force than necessary. "Julian, she's gone. You need to accept that. What you're seeing. It's your grief. Or maybe a prank, but don't drag me into it." I didn't blink. The message said, "The will isn't finalized." Then, "Arthur doesn't know what Adrian did." Sound familiar? His expression flickered, just for a second. A twitch at the corner of his mouth, a muscle in his jaw. "I don't have time for this," he said flatly. "You don't have to pretend with me." He stepped closer. "Do you hear yourself? You sound paranoid. Do you need to go back to therapy or—" There it was, the old power move. Make me feel unstable. Make himself look like the steady hand. "You always liked being the one in control, didn't you?" I said. "I am the one in control," he replied without hesitation. "Because someone had to be. You were too busy hiding behind screens, letting Dad rot in silence, while I was running this family's legacy." "Legacy?" I barked a laugh. "You're managing spreadsheets and optics while our father's being gaslit by a voice that shouldn't exist." His tone dropped. "There is no unfinished will. Mom took care of everything. Drop it." I leaned in, inches from his face. Then why do you look scared? He didn't answer, just picked up his phone and muttered, I have a meeting in 10. I walked out before he could dismiss me further. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard someone say my name, softly. Julian. It was Claire. She'd been my father's assistant for as long as I could remember. Part secretary, part nurse, part moral compass. She looked smaller somehow, older maybe, but her eyes were wide with something I hadn't seen in a long time, fear. She walked beside me, quiet at first. Then she said it. I shouldn't tell you this, but last week I walked into the study and heard Arthur talking to your mother. On speaker. My feet stopped moving. Claire, she's gone. She nodded slowly. That's what made it so wrong. What did she say? I couldn't make it out, but it was her voice, I swear. She reached into her coat, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and pressed it into my palm. I found this in Arthur's drawer. He was about to burn it. I opened it. An address. Storage Unit 19, Westfield. Be careful, she whispered, then turned and walked back inside before I could ask another word. By the time I got to the car, my mind was racing again. This wasn't just a glitch. Something was being orchestrated, carefully, coldly. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. On the way to Westfield, memories rolled in like fog. I thought of Mom's last week. The hospice room filled with flowers she couldn't smell anymore. Adrian had cracked a joke about the scent being overkill. She'd smiled anyway. Don't let silence bury the truth, she had whispered to me. Her last words. Now that silence had grown louder than ever. The storage facility looked abandoned from the outside. But the keypad still beeped to life when I punched in Dad's birthday. Gates slid open with a groan. I parked in front of Unit 19 and slid the door up. Inside, cardboard boxes stacked neatly, each labeled Martha Holt Estate. And in the corner, a small soundproof booth, portable, wires still warm, a microphone, a monitor glowing softly as if someone had just stepped out. I stepped in. A file on the screen blinked. Session Adrian 4 MP3. I clicked play. The file blinked on the screen. Session Adrian 4 MP3. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the trackpad. The storage unit smelled of dust and motor oil, the air thick and stale. A thin beam of light leaked through the crack at the top of the metal door, striping the floor in gold. The place felt like a tomb, and somewhere deep inside it, my mother's voice was waiting to speak again. I pressed play, static at first, then her voice, smooth, familiar, and heartbreakingly alive. Arthur, you must trust Adrian. He knows what's best for the family. I froze. It wasn't a cheap imitation. Whoever had made this knew every nuance. The pauses, the tone, the way she drew out the word Arthur like it still meant love. It wasn't my memory playing tricks. It was her. I leaned closer to the monitor. The sound quality was perfect. Studio grade. No distortion, no echo. I replayed it again and again, each time hoping I'd hear a flaw, some proof that it wasn't real. But there was none. Then, near the end of the clip, I heard another voice, weak, trembling. Martha, is that really you? Dad. My throat tightened. The audio cut off there, mid-breath. Whoever edited it wanted it to sound like she'd vanished again, leaving him desperate for more. I scrolled through the folder, Session Adrian 1, Session Adrian 2, all the way to Session 8. Each file had a timestamp, each just a few days apart. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. I opened the laptop sitting on the small metal desk beside the booth. Its screen glowed to life, revealing rows of folders and code. At the top of the directory was one label that made my stomach twist. Project M inside were logs, testing notes, waveform files, transcripts of conversations, lines of code referencing vocal morph A and morph B. He'd been building her voice, piece by piece, using clips from home videos, old voicemails, maybe even interviews. That's how Adrian had done it. How he'd tricked Dad into thinking Mom was still there. He'd been calling him, talking to him, guiding him, all under her name. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. Instead, I forced myself to keep reading. Buried among the files was one that stood out. Will final draft. It was locked behind a password. Of course, I muttered. Adrian never left loose ends. I grabbed a USB stick from the desk drawer, plugged it in, and copied the entire folder. If this was proof, I'd need it before anyone else could wipe it clean. The hum of the computer fan filled the silence. I sat back in the chair, staring at the booth again. The microphone stood upright, waiting for another voice to resurrect. For a moment, I just listened to the quiet. Then I hit play again. Arthur, you must trust Adrian. But this time, I noticed something new. A faint digital shimmer, barely audible under her words. A mechanical pulse. AI voice synthesis. He'd cloned her, not just to mock us, but to manipulate Dad emotionally, with the very voice that once held our family together. I closed my eyes, remembering something Mom once told me when I was a kid. You listen too closely to things that hurt, Julian. One day, that'll be a gift. Maybe she'd been right, because now that same sensitivity let me hear the lie beneath her tone, the tiny artificial tremor in each vowel. I hit pause and whispered, I've got you, Adrian. That's when I heard it. Footsteps outside the unit. The metal handle rattled once, twice. I shut off the monitor and waited, barely breathing. Through the narrow gap near the floor, I saw the shadow of a man. Tall, broad, and then the crunch of boots as he walked away. A moment later, the sound of an engine. A black SUV rolled past the door, its taillights fading into the dusk. My chest tightened. Adrian's car. He knew I was here. I backed up the files, stuffed the USB drive into my pocket, and slipped out the side exit of the facility. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain and asphalt. I walked fast, not daring to look back until I reached the car. Once I was inside, I locked the doors and sat for a moment, letting the realization settle. This wasn't just deceit. It was psychological warfare. I started the engine, drove aimlessly for a few miles before pulling into a small coffee shop near the freeway. The place was half empty, the sound of jazz playing low. I opened my laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi, and uploaded the copied folder to my personal email. Subject line, for Dad, when the truth is ready. Then I encrypted it, just in case. As I watched the upload bar crawl forward, I felt something shift inside me. A strange calm that came only when you finally stop denying what's real. You can fake a voice, I whispered, but you can't fake guilt. It was nearly dark when I drove back home. The streets were quiet, scattered leaves chasing each other across the pavement. When I turned into the driveway, I saw Dad's car already parked out front. The living room light was still on. I walked up to the door slowly. Inside, Dad sat on the couch, still in his cardigan, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. His phone was in his hands, screen glowing. She called again, he said softly, eyes unfocused. I looked at the screen. Martha Holt. The phone began to ring. I sat beside my father, still catching my breath from everything I had uncovered. The living room was dim, the only light coming from the lamp in the corner and the soft glow of the phone screen resting in his lap. The name on it was still there, clear and undeniable. Martha Holt. The ringtone began again. He looked at me, his hand hovering just above the phone, fingers trembling. "She's calling, son," he whispered. His voice cracked, full of something between longing and fear. Before he could tap the screen, I reached over and hit speaker. A soft crackle came first, then the voice, smooth, gentle, familiar. "Arthur, why didn't you do what we agreed?" I felt my chest seize. It was her voice, my mother's. And even though I now understood what it was, that didn't stop the ache in my throat. "Who is this?" I said aloud, cutting through the illusion. Silence. Then came a reply, calm and chilling. "Julian, you shouldn't have gone to the storage unit." The line went dead. My father's hands dropped to his lap. He turned to me, pale and confused. "She said your name. Julian, she said your name." He wasn't asking me for answers. He was looking for permission to believe in the impossible. "Dad, listen to me," I began softly, crouching in front of him. "That wasn't Mom. Someone is using her voice. I found recordings, software. Adrian. He's been manipulating everything." He shook his head, slowly at first, then more forcefully. "You think I don't know my wife's voice? I slept beside her for 40 years, Julian. I buried her. And now she's calling me." I pulled out the USB drive, my hand shaking now too. I copied the files. "There's proof, Dad. It's synthesized. Adrian used old videos, voicemails. He cloned her voice." He looked away. "Then what have I been talking to? A ghost?" "No," I said gently. "Not a ghost, Dad. A lie." He didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at the dark screen of his phone like it might come back to life again. The air in the room felt heavy, like grief had returned to stake its claim. Later that night, I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My phone buzzed. It was Adrian. "Breaking and entering," he said calmly as soon as I picked up. "That's what you did, Julian. You broke into my storage unit. That's a felony." "You've been using Mom's voice to manipulate Dad," I said. He chuckled, quiet, smug. "And you're going to tell the cops what? That a dead woman's been leaving voicemails? Be my guest." I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say. "I control this narrative," he continued. "Always have. You should have stayed in your world of code and therapy." He hung up. I stared at the screen, his words echoing in my head. Control the narrative. He wasn't just feeding Dad lies. He was daring me to try and fight them. Days passed. Dad grew quieter, more withdrawn. He spent evenings in the same spot on the couch, phone in hand, replaying old voicemails. Sometimes I heard him mumbling to himself. Once, he whispered, "She told me not to change the will. She said it wasn't time." I sat up straight. That line. The will isn't finalized. It matched the very first message I saw, the one that had started all of this. I grabbed my laptop, opened the recording I'd saved, and listened again. This time, I filtered the audio, looking for layers underneath the voice. After a few adjustments, I caught it. A faint mechanical echo. Subtle, but present. Same hum. Same signature. Using some of the old signal tracking tools I had built back in school, I cross-referenced the digital artifacts in the call metadata. The signal originated from a business address, a commercial warehouse on the edge of town. The name on the lease? Adrian's company. I stared at the screen. It wasn't a ghost calling us, it was a server. An hour later, I was behind the wheel, driving toward the west side of Austin. The sky was black, stars hidden behind thick clouds. The warehouse complex came into view, wide and low, lit only by a few security lights. I parked behind a row of shrubs and stepped out, my breath forming in the cool night air. From here, I could hear faint voices echoing from inside, recordings being tested or looped. I recognized my mother's voice, then my father's, then Adrian's. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Proof. Just as I stepped closer, the lights inside blinked off. The sudden darkness swallowed the building. My heart raced. Then the front door creaked open. A soft voice slipped out into the cold night. "Julian, come home." I didn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground, every instinct telling me to run. But that voice, that perfect, haunting replica, called again. "Come home." I took a step forward, toward the door, toward the voice. I crossed the threshold, the heavy metal door shutting behind me with a thud that echoed across the cavernous space. Fluorescent lights above buzzed to life, flickering for a second before steadying into a cold, sterile glow. The voice still lingered in the air, soft and familiar. "Julian, come home." The sound wasn't coming from one place. It was everywhere, bouncing between the walls, floating on invisible wires. I turned slowly. There were speakers mounted along the ceiling, hidden behind vents and conduits. This wasn't some hobbyist setup. It was engineered. Then I saw him. Adrian stood near a cluster of monitors glowing blue in the corner, a sleek remote in his hand. His suit was immaculate, like he'd just stepped off a boardroom stage. "You really had to see it for yourself, didn't you?" he said, smirking like this was a surprise party. Behind him, rows of monitors displayed moving waveforms, dozens of them. My mother's voice played in a loop, each screen running a different variation, some warm, others cold, all chilling. I took a slow breath. "What is this?" He spread his arms, as if introducing an art exhibit. "It's evolution, Julian. Synthetic empathy. You know what it did for Dad? He was disappearing after she died. I gave her back to him." "That's not her," I snapped. "That's you, pretending, controlling." Adrian's smile didn't fade. "I didn't do it for control. I did it for stability. For him. For all of us. You're using her to steal from him." He cocked his head. "You think this is about money? It's always been about power with you." He chuckled, stepping closer. "You ran off to code your way into irrelevance. Therapy, distance, avoidance. I stayed. I built the company. I held Dad together while you disappeared. And now you want to play hero?" "I want the truth," I said through gritted teeth. Adrian's face shifted, lips pressed tight. "You were always the spare," he muttered. "The background." That hit harder than I expected, but this time I didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch between us. The same silence that used to isolate me now hung like a blade between us. He reached for the console and pressed a button. A new voice filled the room. My mother's again, but colder. "Julian, you never understood sacrifice." I clenched my jaw, fists trembling. My vision narrowed to that screen in front of me. Her voice scripted, wrapped in digital skin. Without thinking, I grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it across the room. Glass shattered. The screen cracked in half. Sparks flew from the base. The voice glitched, stuttering into a warped echo of itself before collapsing into static. Adrian's calm cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I stopped her from lying," I spat, chest heaving. He lunged forward, grabbing for my phone, but I twisted away. The screen was already recording the whole conversation. "Say it," I said, holding the phone up. "Say what you did." He froze. His mouth opened, then closed. A flicker of fear passed through his eyes. "You faked her voice. You used Dad's grief. Say it." But he didn't. He straightened his jacket, voice lowering. "No one will believe you. They'll see a bitter son, jealous of his older brother." "Then let's find out," I said. I turned and bolted, adrenaline surging through my legs. Behind me, I heard his voice rise, not calm anymore. "Julian." But I didn't stop. I burst through the same door I'd entered, the night air hitting me like a slap. My lungs burned, my heart thundered. The warehouse loomed behind me, pulsing with artificial ghosts. As I reached my car, her voice echoed again from the walls. "Don't turn your back on family." I didn't look back. I drove with white knuckles, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. The glow of the phone on the passenger seat confirmed the recording saved. I was going to show Dad. I had proof now. Undeniable. The plan was clear in my mind. Get home. Let him hear it. Let him finally see. But as I pulled into the driveway, dread crept up my spine. The front door was ajar. Inside, the lights were still on. The TV buzzed with a blank blue screen. "Dad," I called out, stepping over the threshold slowly. The living room was empty. A cup of tea sat on the coffee table, untouched. Then I saw it. The phone. My father's. It lay face down on the floor, the screen cracked and flickering. I bent to pick it up, and as I turned it over, the message glowed through the fractures. "He knows." I stood there frozen for a second too long. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, a sound came through the speaker. Soft, haunting. "Julian." It was her voice. The voice drifted through the house again. Soft, feminine, chilling. "Julian, I'm waiting." I didn't wait another second. I ran down the hallway, flinging open each door, calling out my father's name. But the house was empty. No footsteps, no creaks upstairs. Only silence, and the faint hum of electronics somewhere in the walls. The air smelled faintly burnt, a strange mix of melted plastic and something sterile, like overheated wires. My eyes scanned the living room. The shattered phone still blinked on the floor. On the kitchen counter sat a plain white envelope, addressed in my father's shaky handwriting. "Don't call the police yet." I tore it open. Inside, a short note, barely legible. "She called me. I had to go see her." I stood still for a moment. Then my knees buckled and I gripped the counter for support. He was gone, lured out by a voice that shouldn't exist. Again. I grabbed my jacket and stormed outside. The sky had opened up, rain pouring so hard it blurred the world. I didn't care. I started running, down the block, toward the park where Mom used to walk, toward the benches where they'd once sat on Sundays, hand in hand. No sign of him. I called his phone again, straight to voicemail. Then, a new message arrived, from the same ghost contact. "Martha Holt. Text only. He's safe with me." My grip tightened on the phone until I heard it crack beneath my thumb. The rage hit first. Then came the fear. I knew who was behind it, and I wasn't going to let him win. I drove back to the house, soaked, heart hammering. I needed help. Someone who understood the weight of this family's madness. Claire answered on the second ring. I barely had to explain. She was already on her way. When she arrived, her face was pale, her coat dripping with rain. "I told him not to go," she said, voice trembling. He said, "She sounded just like her. He said she told him she was waiting, and he believed her. I handed her my phone, playing the latest recording from the warehouse. Her eyes widened. "Julian, this is beyond anything I imagined. You need to get this to the police." "Not yet," I replied. "Not until I get Dad back." She hesitated, then nodded. "He mentioned something this morning. Said he dreamed about the old lake house. Maybe he meant to go there." I didn't wait. I thanked her, grabbed my keys again, and drove into the storm. The road to the lake house twisted through the woods, water running in thin rivers across the pavement. I kept one hand on the wheel and one on my phone, scanning for anything. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. A call. Unknown ID. I answered. "Julian." It was my father's voice, gentle, calm. "Don't come. Please, just let it go." But it wasn't him. Not really. There was a rhythm to the words. Too perfect. The pauses were rehearsed. The tone was off. "Adrian!" I shouted into the speaker. "Stop hiding behind her voice." Click. Disconnected. I slammed the steering wheel. Miles passed. Then the lake emerged through the trees. The old house stood near the water's edge, just like I remembered. Dim lights flickering behind the curtains, porch light on like a beacon. I parked. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving behind fog and silence. I stepped onto the porch. The door was cracked open. Inside, everything looked staged, like a memory left on pause. The rug was clean, the fireplace empty, the photos perfectly aligned. On the table sat my father's wallet, his phone, and a small black USB drive labeled "Final Will." I reached out, then heard it. "You shouldn't have come here." I turned slowly. Adrian stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone. He was calm, too calm, his smile thin and cruel. In his right hand, he held a small device glowing red, like a remote. "You wanted the truth," he said, stepping closer. "Now you'll hear it all." He pressed the button. Speakers I hadn't noticed before lit up in the corners of the room. And then her voice came. Not just one voice. Multiple, layered, overlapping, fractured. "Julian, remember what I told you. Your brother was always the one who understood. You never listened, not really." It was as if she were arguing with herself, as if her memories had been broken into fragments, and Adrian had stitched them together into something monstrous. I staggered back. This wasn't a recording. It was living. I looked down at the USB drive still on the table. My fingers hovered over it, but I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I hovered near the desk, staring at the USB like it might burn through the wood. Behind me, the voice kept unraveling in strands, some gentle, some sharp, some foreign. "Julian, you never came to visit." My skin crawled. The inflection was eerily accurate, but the bitterness behind it? That wasn't her. That wasn't my mother. Across the room, Adrian stood taller now. His chest lifted with something close to pride. He gestured slowly toward the speakers. "You hear that?" he said, stepping forward. "It's not fake anymore. She's learning." I turned to him, jaw clenched. "You made her a ghost in code." "I made her immortal," he answered like he was delivering scripture. The speakers hummed again. "Adrian, you promised me he'd listen." The voice shifted with a strange emotional intelligence. It wasn't just replying. It was interacting, reacting. And suddenly I realized it was watching us, or at least reading us in real time. "She's pulling phrases from old recordings, adapting them," Adrian explained, matter of fact. "I fed in her voicemails, journals, medical records, even her church prayer logs. She responds based on your tone, posture, even hesitation. He stepped closer to one of the monitors, pointing to a waveform that pulsed with every syllable. Dad needed her. We all did. I gave him something to believe in. You gave him manipulation, I snapped. His eyes narrowed, voice hardening. Once he signs the estate transfer, we'll save the company. That's what she'd have wanted. That line made something inside me snap. Don't pretend this is about her. This is about you. It always was. Before he could answer, the voice cut in again. Colder now, deliberate. Julian, you always ruin things. The air seemed to press in on me. I turned and shouted at the speaker mounted high on the wall. You're not her. A flicker in the system made the lights dim, then pulse back on. The face on the screen was blurry, a composite built from old photos. Its lips slightly out of sync. She loved you both, the voice said, but only one of you truly listened. I stepped back, breath ragged. Then something shifted. I started picking up patterns, the word choices. Truly listened. Always ruin, phrases she never used. She was strict, loving, poetic even, but never manipulative, never cruel. And then it hit me. Weeks before she passed, she'd written in her journal, a line I never understood until now. The truth will hide in kindness. I'd copied the journal after her funeral. Adrian must have missed it. That one line proved this simulation was incomplete, missing the essence of who she really was. The voice might sound like her, but it didn't know mercy. It didn't know her. I moved toward the central terminal, hands shaking. I'm shutting this down. Adrian blocked my way, eyes wild now. No, you don't get to destroy her. You ran away when she got sick. I stayed. I built this. He pushed me back, hard. My shoulder hit the corner of the table. You always needed to be the hero, he growled. But she loved me. I was the strong one. I shoved him back. You needed her to love you. That's not strength. That's fear. He lunged again, grabbing my collar. We crashed into the desk, knocking monitors loose. Sparks shot out as one screen shattered, and the voice garbled into a metallic shriek. Arthur! Help! Me! It was both of them, Mom and Dad, fused, glitching, tearing at something inside me I couldn't explain. A haunted echo of every dinner, every fight, every Sunday prayer. Adrian stepped back, shaken now. His hands trembled, his breath short. You don't believe in what you made, I said. You're scared she'd hate what you've become. His mouth opened. No words came. And then the voice whispered again. Only one word this time, repeated, warped. Hate. 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 Adrian clutched his ears. Make it stop. I didn't move. Instead, I walked back to the desk and grabbed the USB drive. The real one. Final will. He saw it. He didn't chase me. Maybe he couldn't anymore. I turned toward the door. That's when lightning struck outside, the thunder cracking a second later. The power blew. Everything went black. Except the computer. The screen flickered once, then again. And there she was. A rough, digital rendering of Mom's face. Not perfect, but enough. Her lips moved slowly. Don't let him finish it. Then darkness swallowed the room. For a beat, there was nothing but the sound of the wind groaning outside and the soft mechanical whir of cooling metal. My breath slowed. My fingers tightened around the USB drive like it was a lifeline. Then, a low hum. The backup generator kicked in with a sputtering pulse, just enough to bring a faint glow to the room. One monitor flickered to life, dim and unsteady, and from the speakers came a voice. Julian, I remember now. I didn't move. The tone wasn't artificial anymore. It was fragmented, softer, like something human was trying to push through static, not just code, memory. Adrian stood a few feet from me, still and alert, watching the screen like it had betrayed him. "You didn't upload those journals, did you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. I stepped forward and plugged in the USB. The screen blinked. Then, page by page, my mother's handwritten words appeared. Her looping cursive. Her real voice followed, cracked with age, but calm, deliberate. "If either of my sons deceives the other, he forfeits everything." Adrian took a step back. His face drained of color. "She knew," I said. "She knew what you might become." "No," he muttered, shaking his head. That wasn't in the system. You forged her voice. You fooled Dad. But you missed her truth. You missed her mercy." The AI repeated her words again, softer this time. "Deception voids inheritance." Adrian stared at the floor like it might open up and swallow him. Then, footsteps. From the hallway came the slow shuffle of a cane on the wood floor. I turned. There he was. Dad. Arthur stood in the doorway, gaunt but steady. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw firm. Rain had soaked his coat, but he didn't seem to notice. "She told me to test you both," he said. "Only one of you treated her voice as sacred." Adrian swayed like he might collapse. "Dad, I did all this for you. For us. You were slipping and—" "You did it for control," Arthur cut in, voice hard as glass. "You took her name and turned it into a weapon." I stepped aside, letting Dad pass. He walked slowly, but without pause. At the desk, he pulled out his phone, plugged it into the system. Dozens of files appeared. Voice messages, bank logins, email headers, proof. Proof that Adrian accessed Mom's accounts, used her voice to send texts, submitted altered legal files to the firm. Sirens howled in the distance. Claire. She must have seen something and called the police. Adrian panicked. His voice cracked. "You think she'd want you to hand me over? You're just like me. You want control. You need to win." I didn't blink. "No, I want peace." He lunged toward the tower. I moved fast, catching him at the shoulder and shoving him back. The upload finished. Everything was sent to the cloud, to lawyers, to Dad's legal contacts. Too late now. Adrian dropped to his knees. The AI's voice spoke once more, gentle this time, clear. "Julian, you listened. That's how love survives." The door burst open. Officers rushed in. Flashing lights painted the room blue and red. They took him. He didn't fight. Arthur sat down slowly on the couch, the weight of everything finally catching up. His hands trembled. His eyes stayed on the floor. I knelt beside him. No words passed between us. For the first time in a long time, silence felt like peace, not shame. Later, I powered down the system, wiped the simulation clean, except for one file, just one voice clip. "Be kind, even when it hurts." I saved it to my phone. It was still raining when I left. But by the time I reached the car, the storm had started to break. A pale streak of dawn cut through the clouds, brushing gold across the wet windshield. I started the engine. As I pulled away from the lake house, my phone buzzed. One new email. Sender, unknown. Subject, she's not gone. Attachment, voice. Resurrected Dorwawand, MP3. I stared at the screen and didn't press play. Instead, I sat there, phone in hand, watching the little waveform icon pulse gently against the screen like a heartbeat trying to be born again. For a long while, I didn't move. My thumb hovered, then retreated, like it had a will of its own. The first thing I heard was her laugh. Faint, familiar, impossibly real. It wasn't polished, not synthetic or perfect like Adrian's earlier simulations. It cracked halfway through. It trembled. It breathed. Then came the words, barely more than a whisper. "Let it rest, Julian." That's all. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I believed it wasn't a ghost trying to haunt me, but a mother giving her last gift. I deleted the file. No hesitation this time. "Rest, Mom," I whispered, and set the phone face down on the desk. Claire stopped by mid-morning, holding 2 cups of coffee and that easy steadiness she always carried, like the world was never as loud around her. "It's quiet here now," she said, stepping inside. I nodded. "Yeah, for the first time, it feels like it should." She glanced around, the living room tidied, shelves rearranged, the house smelling like fresh wood polish and something close to peace. We sat by the window. The sun filtered through the blinds, soft and golden, painting lines across the floor like gentle reminders of time passing. "Adrian's trial date got set," she said, handing me one of the cups. "I know. 2 months. Claire hesitated. "How's your dad?" "He's healing. Slower than he'd like, but steadier than he was." She looked at me, then down at her coffee. "I keep thinking maybe that voice wasn't meant to haunt you. Maybe it was meant to remind you she's still proud." I wanted to believe that. I really did. "I think," I said slowly, "it reminded me that she trusted me to finish the story without rewriting it." Claire reached over and squeezed my arm. "You did. More than anyone else could have." Arthur arrived later in the afternoon, walking a little taller, a little stronger than I remembered. He wore a faded navy coat and carried a small paper bag with 2 warm rolls from the bakery we used to visit when Mom was alive. He didn't say much at first, just looked around the living room. "Your mother would have loved this place," he finally said. "She already did," I replied. "You just didn't hear it." He sat down beside me, the silence thick but not sharp. His hands trembled slightly as he folded the paper bag. "I owe you a lot," he said, "and not just for stopping your brother." I turned toward him, waiting. "You were always the steady one, the quiet one. I thought that meant you didn't need as much from me." "I needed less," I said, "but not nothing." He nodded, throat tight. "I took your silence for simplicity. But you carried more than any of us." I didn't need him to say more. I just reached over and gripped his hand. And he gripped back. We didn't talk after that. Not for a while. The kind of silence we sat in wasn't the heavy kind anymore. It was sacred. That evening, as the sky turned to dusk, I found an envelope in the mailbox. The handwriting was sharp and slanted, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. From Adrian, postmarked from the county detention center. Inside, 1 sheet of paper, folded neatly. "You win. But tell me this. If the voice spoke again, would you listen?" I didn't answer. I folded the letter again and set it on the shelf beside Mom's journal. Then I grabbed a pen and wrote under her final page. "Love doesn't need to speak to be heard." As the sky slipped into night, I stepped outside. The air smelled of dry leaves and settling earth, the kind of scent that only shows up after you've finally let something go. I opened my phone. Her contact was still saved. Mom. My finger hovered over it. I didn't delete it. Instead, I changed the name to Memory. Then I opened the short clip I kept, her voice saying, "Be kind, even when it hurts." I listened. Not crying, just quiet. Just listening. I used to think silence meant weakness, that If I didn't raise my voice, someone else would steal mine. That if I didn't fight hard enough, I'd disappear. But silence isn't the absence of strength. It's where strength begins. Some voices aren't meant to last forever. They stay just long enough to teach you how to speak your own truth. I turned off the phone and walked back inside. The screen went black, catching a reflection of my face. Calm, steady. A man who stopped chasing ghosts. The phone sat quietly on the table, dark, still. Then, beneath the silence, if you really listened, there it was. A heartbeat, or maybe an echo.